One of the ideas suggested is they open it, they pay a sort of a prorated down payment for the wall, which I think people will agree that you need. You need the wall. In fact, I see a lot of the Democrats almost all of them are breaking, saying, look, walls are good, walls are good.
How is a wall more important than families? The shutdown is not a glitch. It is a crisis that the president alone created and that the president alone can end.
Let's bring in our panel now. Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano, national security analyst Morgan Ortagus, and Jonathan Swan, national political reporter for Axios. The president there asking for a prorated down payment on his wall in a continuing resolution, which would fund government for 3 weeks or so. I did the math really quickly. $5.7 billion divided by 365 times 21, $327 million he wants. Can he get that out of the Congress?
Well, I may have an MBA, but I cannot do math in my head the way that you just did.
I did it on the computer.
Good. I think when the American people are looking at this has devolved into a cafeteria food fight with the Democrats in Congress saying, but he started it. And I think that's why people are so frustrated. I think whatever moral argument that Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats felt that they had around Christmas or even 2 weeks ago, for me, that has really evaporated in all of this because, you know, there is no point at this point. We have this many resolutions come to the table that you're not seeing Democrats negotiate with the president, and this standoff is hurting real people. There are real people that I am in the Navy Reserve that I drill with, that are federal agents that work at the UN in New York. These are friends of mine that have children that are living paycheck to paycheck because, you know, they may have a wife or a husband at home, and so I think that it's time for both sides of the aisle to get over themselves and to get a real solution here. And you know, this moral imperative that the Democrats think they have, I think, has been washed away. It's time to come to the table.
Is it telling, Judge, that the Democratic measure just to open the government with no money for the wall got 2 more votes in the Senate than the president's plan did?
Yes, it is very telling. I was surprised to see the 6 Republicans in the Senate go for it. But I want to pick up on what Morgan was saying and not address the politics and not address the morality, but just address the Constitution. According to Congressman Will Hurd, former CIA agent and a conservative Republican, through whose district most of the wall would pass, the vast majority of that property is not owned by the federal government. The president cannot condemn property on his own. He can't take property on his own. He can only do that with an express authorization from the Congress. And Congressman Hurd says most of my constituents are saying, not in my backyard. What does that mean? That means litigation over the value of each parcel of property. The president could get $7 billion tomorrow. He won't be able to spend it for years until the litigation is over with.
And here's one of the other things about the wall, too, in Texas, because you have to build it out of the Rio Grande floodplain.
Right.
These illegal migrants coming up from Honduras who want to get apprehended by the Border Patrol will simply have to cross the river, put feet on American soil, and it will be like there was no barrier there.
Once their feet are on American soil, they're protected by due process.
So Jonathan, Morgan was saying that tomorrow federal workers will miss their second pay period. And for a lot of people, this really is going to begin to bite. So how do you read the political pressure and how it's growing, and who's it really putting pressure on, Congress or the president?
It's really hard to say because the president is seeing the Coast Guard, for example, not getting paid, and they've tried to hotline a bill to pay them through the Senate. That the military is certainly, Trump sees that as his constituency. He said this publicly, that a lot of these federal workers are Democrats, so he does sort of distinguish in some ways about that. And obviously the Democrats, a lot of these, you know, they see this as their constituents, and particularly members from states with lots of federal workers, Maryland, Virginia, others. So there is pressure on both sides, but the leadership is so dug in. Nancy Pelosi has said that walls themselves are immoral. So for her to then give him money for something called a wall is then off the table, or even, you know, steel slats or whatever.
Right, but so is off the table taking down the immoral wall that already exists along the border.
Sure. But
just trying to have it both ways.
So you now have this situation. I was talking to someone in the White House today about this, and they're saying, well, Democrats are now saying, maybe we'll give you $5.7 billion for things along the border, but not barriers and wall. Well, that's not going to cut it. That's everything that, except for what Trump really wants.
If you're the president's re-election campaign members and you're watching these past 2 weeks, I think you're elated, because any thought that you had that the Democrats might moderate and nominate someone like Biden and try to be responsible, if this is the behavior that we've seen over the last 2 weeks going into 2020, the president's re-election campaign must feel great.
However, there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect here. I want to jump ahead and replay something that Wilbur Ross said this morning, that even the president said he could have said better, and then the way Wilbur Ross walked it back this afternoon. Listen here.
The banks and the credit unions should be making credit available to them. These are basically government-guaranteed loans. We're painfully aware that there are hardships inflicted on the individual workers. All I was trying to do is make sure that they're aware that there are possible other things that could help somewhat mitigate their problems.
So it's a judge that the administration is trying to take the moral high ground here to say, we know that workers are hurting, but it's important that we get border security. And then Wilbur Ross comes out and says, well, I don't know why they can't get a loan.
I think he really cut the ground out from under the president there. I mean, the world in which he lives, he can call up his banker and get a loan for almost anything that he wants. But the federal government workers cannot do that. I mean, it's one thing to say, well, you work for the federal government, it's bankrupt, what do you expect? There are times when it can't pay their bills. It's another thing to say, what's wrong with you? Go borrow the money. Nobody accepts that as a reasonable response. Right.
Now, State of the Union. The president had his heels dug in. He sent the note back to Nancy Pelosi yesterday. I'll see you on the 29th as scheduled. She wrote him back, no, you won't. And then we heard that there was going to be a plan B. Late last night, the president tweeted, as the shutdown was going on, Nancy Pelosi asked me to give the State of the Union address. I agreed. She then changed her mind because of the shutdown, suggesting a later date. This is her prerogative. I will do the address when the shutdown is over. I'm not looking for an alternative venue for the State of the Union address. I mean, he got the political capital, Jonathan, of making her disinvite him.
Right.
But then does he lose by saying, you know what, she's right?
I don't know. I mean, I was surprised. It was sort of out of character for Trump, and I texted this to a few. I was like, it was quite surprising to see him do that. And I said, is there some backstory here? Is it political gain? The two things I've learned is, one, there were real logistical issues with a lot of these other options, but also more than that, and I heard this from people who discuss this with Trump, is he likes the tradition. He really likes the house.
What bigger venue could he get?
And he didn't want to give up the pomp and the circumstance of the house. So I think that was really the ultimate.
He's got to wait a little while. He's got to wait. All right.